Possiamo? Cominciamo. Good evening, and thank you very much for coming, despite the horrible weather, to this webinar discussion on Modi's India after the elections, organized by AIICP, the Association of India-Italy Cooperation, with the support, fundamental support of the Fondazione Corriere della Sera. Well, it has been an unusual outcome of these elections. All the polls predicted something else. There were some concerns, but by and large, the idea was of a runaway success by Prime Minister Modi and his team, which would have called for far-reaching changes in the way in which the political scene in India would organize itself, and perhaps constitutional adjustments of a complicated and perhaps somewhat worrying kind. All this did not happen. BJP, Prime Minister Modi's party, remains the largest party in India, but the picture has changed. And I think in the last days there's been a lot of analysis on what happened exactly. What we will try and discuss this evening is what might happen, why it did happen, and what might be the next steps for the country, having borne in mind what the 900 million electors and 600 million voters decided the future of the country should be in the coming years. For this we have a very powerful panel with us this evening, some of which is here in presence. Others will be connecting with us via Zoom. Alessandra Muglia from Corriere della Sera has just come back from India. She has been there at the time of the elections and will give us first-hand ideas of what went on. Amy Kazmin was for many years the Southeast Asia correspondent for the Financial Times. She is now in Rome, and she has a long-standing experience of Indian affairs and a deep knowledge of the Asian picture altogether. Marco Masciaga, the correspondent from Sole 24 Ore in Delhi, is one of the small but very devoted and competent band of foreign Italian journalists and correspondents in India. We're very happy to welcome you here now from Delhi. Nicola, Missaglia, I think, is well known to all of you. From ISPI, is a research fellow but covers Asia and India in particular in great detail. And finally, Sidharth Bhatia is a distinguished Indian journalist, founder editor of The Wire, which was an important show in India, which sadly has been closed down by the previous government. I'm not sure the present government is going to reopen it again. But he has been a long-standing observer, critic, and very knowledgeable journalist and expert on the Indian scene altogether. With this team, we will have our discussion tonight, and what I would intend to do is to start by asking our team some questions to which they will be asked to respond within a rigid time limit of 6 minutes, which may be difficult, I know, but anyway, which will allow us to have a couple of rounds for the entire team, and perhaps give us time as well for a short Q&A session. Open the session at 10 for comments from the audience. And having said this, without much further, let me start right away our discussion, and I would like to start with Alessandra Muglia, if I may. Well, as we said earlier on, the outcome of the elections was to someone unexpected, and the anti-incumbency factor. Anti-incumbency is something which is used in Indian political jargon, not very much in Europe. It essentially means that those who are in power tend to lose the next time round, or to fare poorly the next time round, essentially. Anti-incumbency was not meant to function this time. It was meant to be a runaway success. It has, in fact, happened. Why is it so? Why was a factor which is a permanent issue in Indian policy and was not meant to be one now, once again become one of the defining elements of the campaign and of the election? Interesting. It was, is it a proof of a vibrant democracy, or is it in fact a manifestation of an immature democracy, which is prone to inequality and caste in influence decisions. Similarly, one of the other factors which characterized this election was that the Prime Minister Modi's campaign was essentially centered on the idea of a Hindu nation, of Hindutva as a defining element of the Indian nation, different and perhaps in a way alternative to the traditional multicultural, multi-ethnic and substantially liberal and Western-based orientation of the Indian state and constitution. Well, it was meant to be again not only the fundamental point of his campaign, but also something which would have enabled him to consolidate his success. It did not happen. And once again, these are two questions for you. Why did it not happen? And why is anti-incumbency really that important? And why was it supposed not to be this time?
First of all, I'd like to clear away the doubts about the anti-incumbency, because there has been some analysts in India who question it. They said that as the rate of the percentage of votes that the BJP got was much more or less the same as in 2019, so we cannot speak of anti-incumbency. How can we speak of anti-incumbency if BJP got more or less the same percentage of vote than in the last elections? Actually, that is true. I mean, the percentage was more or less the same. It's 37%. But as you know, what made the difference was the distribution of seats. Because what happened is that the BJP has lost a lot of grounds in his bastions in the north, like Uttar Pradesh, in what is called the Hindi-speaking states, so where normally he won overwhelmingly, whereas Varanasi and so on. While he gained some votes in the south, where it is normally a weak area for BJP. Mostly in some area, it's like Kerala, he didn't have any seats. Now he got one, but he got also some seats in other area of the south, in Karnataka, like the state of Bangalore, for instance. And I think we can speak about anti-incumbency for this reason, because BJP lost ground in the area where it was strong. So also it was in power locally. So I think we cannot deny that this factor has been very important in these elections. And as Ambassador Armellini reminded us, I was in India in the last few days, and I was actually in Uttar Pradesh, and I had the opportunity to get some insight about what could be the result, because I had the opportunity to talk with this Yagendra Yadav. Maybe you have heard about him because he was in all TV channel. Because he is a sociologist, he teaches in a university, but he's also the advisor of the Congress, and most important, is one who makes predictions. And talking to me, he told me exactly what it happened later, 1 week later. It was really impressive to me, because not only he told me that BJP would lose ground in his heartland, not only told me that he would gain some consensus in the south, where normally he has none, nearly none, but he also predicted that the gain he would have in the south wouldn't turn out in seats. So that's why, at the very end, even though the percentage of vote are the same, actually the seats in parliament are very different. With the same percentage of vote, this year, BJP got like 70 seats less than 5 years ago. So he just give an explanation of that. And then on those day traveling there, I had the opportunity also to listen to people and to perceive the growing sort of discontent. Also, even in the city, in the holy city of Varanasi, which is normally is the constituency where Prime Minister Narendra Modi normally presents himself for the elections. And in the past, it was always an overwhelming victory for him. And so I didn't expect actually to find such so many voices of discontent. And for instance, I talked to two categories of people. They are ordinary people, like boatmen, you know, the one who carry tourists along the to tour along the Ganges to see the city. And I talked to the representative of this community of 3,000 people, family included, so it's quite a huge community. And he showed me a letter saying, well, this time we won't vote for Modi if the authority don't they keep on giving license to other ship company which are, you know, big scale, big like modern one, and they are in competition with their small boat, wooden boat, the traditional one. And he was complaining not only about his business, their business, which is going down, but also about the quality of the experience that tourists are doing in Varanasi, because the modern ship, they don't stop to do the puja, so they say at risk there is the sacrality or experience of Varanasi, not only our business, and that's it. And the other big category was, for instance, the one, the textile sector, the one who works in the textile sector, which employs like 500,000 people there, so it's a very big, important sector. Also them, talking to some of them, they told me, well, we have always voted for BJP, but now we are facing growing inflation, so the energy is, for us, is a problem. And there is no compensation for us. Before, there was, now none of this. So there was, you know, resentment also by these people. And of course, the great threat to the central government was in the rural area. That was the most bigger threat from the farmers. We know they have been protesting for many times. Also them because of energy rising, the cost of energy that is rising. And together with that point, there was also the fact that, you know, with the modernization, new project that could, I mean, the challenge is that their land is being expropriated, and they say that without fair compensations, and also without involving the community. So there is a way they are questioning the kind of development that is going on. And also this is a big community because, for instance, I talked to two brothers, and they were against this project of building a hub for transport, which will include the lands of 3,000 people, including their land. So it's a huge amount of lands. And they managed to take the case to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, well, just stop doing this. We will tell you later. So they are trying to understand what to do. But for the moment, they managed to stop this project. That is to say that, no doubt, there has been an anti-incumbency factor. It was very evident. And And also, going to your question, is this anti-incumbency a signal of the part of society, of the vitality of democracy, or rather is like expression of inequalities? I think what happened is that people who were affected the more by this problem, economic problem, like rising inflation, and also this equality, also caste, which because there is also a program of reviewing subsidy for caste, for certain caste. So these people find their voice, and so managed to revitalize democracy, because they find a way to express themselves. Of course, this was at the same time there was Gandhi doing the march along the countries, and they're also mobilizing civil society. I spoke to one professor in Varanasi who was coordinating the different activists from school, university, farmer. So there has been behind the scene, on the scene there was Gandhi March, behind the scene this very important work of networking to connect with people, okay? So about the failure of the Hindutva ideology, we saw it, the very symbolic loss was Ayodhya, where the temple was built. On the one hand, maybe they had already capitalized the Hindu voters for that. So that was already done, okay? And after what prevailed was the economic factor. So as if unemployment rate growing. So it's as if people say, okay, we don't worry about temple. First, instead of putting Hindu first, just put economy first. Economy first, that doesn't mean only to have an initiative pro-business, but also from common people. So connected to ordinary people, because what they say is BJP doesn't have answer for ordinary people, okay?
Thank you very much. Well, this was particularly interesting, also bearing in mind the fact that you have just returned from India. That is why we allowed you to speak grossly over time, which means that I hope everybody else will stick to the limit, otherwise we'll have trouble in ending this thing. I would like to turn, and thank you very much. I think all this was particularly interesting. Not everyone knows why Ayodhya is important. In fact, it is important because there used to be a mosque there which was demolished after many years of turmoil and violence and so on, because the Hindu fundamentalists believed that the god Ram was actually born there. Gods are actually born and die in Indian mythology, which is unusual for us, but not in India. And violence was repeated, and the mosque was finally demolished by hordes of, hooligans, in fact. And it became a standing point of Hindu nationalism, Hindu intolerance. That is why Ayodhya was so important, in fact, in the collective mind, both of proponents and of opponents. And not everyone knows about Ayodhya.
There are many other projects. They say other 7 projects.
Yes, of course. Yes, well, I mean, because gods live and are born and move all over the places. There's many things which need to be done. Also, you cannot touch the straits between Sri Lanka and India, because the monkey army went through there to liberate whoever it was. I now forget. So, I mean, this is again, it's a particular trait of Indian society which perhaps should be we will have an interesting discussion at some point why it is so important. Anyway, thank you. And continuing on the same line, I would like now, if I may, turn to Amy Kazmin, again trying to look a little bit deeper into what happened and why. Well, one of the points which were raised, in fact, the Financial Times were one of the first, I think, to raise this point at some point. Inflation, unemployment, growing inequality were traits not of a campaign, but of an economic situation which continued to prevail. Apparently, this was one of the reasons why, in fact, the very optimistic and gung-ho message on the part of Prime Minister Modi didn't carry all the weight which it was supposed to carry and was expected to do. There was also concern, as Alessandra Muglia was saying, within the farmers and the farming community and the lower caste, but also within the business community. I think there were rumors at some point that, in fact, not only some of the decisions taken by the Modi government tended to favor the larger concentrations. It was echoes, sort of weak echoes of long-forgotten license Raj coming back. I mean, the relationship between the Adani group and Mr. Modi came under discussion and may have influenced the orientations of part of the business community. Anyway, there are a number of things into this, but it's not for me to say, but for you to tell us what was actually working and what happened and why.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I unfortunately was not covering the just concluded Indian election, but I did cover the two preceding Indian elections. And so I'd actually like to kind of go back to the beginning, to a decade ago, because I think that the discontent from voters and some of what we're seeing now probably has its roots back then. In 2014, when Modi was elected for the first time, he campaigned on a promise of, jobs, 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 and bringing lots of jobs and jobs opportunities. India has a very, very large number of people that hold university or college degrees, unfortunately not necessarily of fabulous quality and not necessarily positioning them to really take on super demanding white-collar, high-skilled professional jobs, but they have very high aspirations. They come from farming families. They've been the first in their family to maybe get some form of higher education, and their big dream is to move off the land. And in 2014, Modi promised that he was going to create jobs and job opportunities for this category of people. In 2019, at his first re-election campaign, I went out into the countryside of northern India to rural areas and talked to young people from farming families that had voted for Modi and had kind of put a lot of faith and hope in his job creation promise. And those people were rather frustrated because they were still on the farm and still in the farmyard selling their vegetables and dals to, traders who had a lot of pricing power over them. And people were a little frustrated and fed up and didn't feel that the promises had been realized. The election kind of turned because of a national security incident, and it changed from a kind of a economically driven election to a kind of national security election. India sent a missile into Pakistan. There was a kind of warlike situation with its neighbors. So the mood changed of the electorate a lot. And I think a lot of voters that have been kind of not feeling that contented with Modi's election performance kind of rallied behind him because it seemed like it was a kind of a tough guy national security situation. And Modi seemed like the man to represent India's interests against its neighbor Pakistan. But I think that finally, at the end of the day, although the economy has been growing a lot, the opportunities for people of the working class are not very many, not very attractive. And I think there's a lot of frustration among voters. So I think that is a factor, especially in the North. Now, I think I'd like to point out that in talking about the Indian election, we think of it as one country and the Indian election, but in a way, this is like many, many elections across the country, even the competing, the BJP was competing in every part of the country, but in every part of the country, or in many different parts of the country, it was actually competing against different opponents. So it's hard to really overstate the different local factors that can come into play in these elections. But if we talk about the Hindi heartland, the way, as the previous speaker mentioned, I think a thing that's incredibly important in the results is the fact that the opposition unified. Uttar Pradesh, which was mentioned here, is the biggest state which sends the most number of delegates to parliament. And in the last election, if I can remember from that far back. I think they got 67 of the 70 parliament seats. Maybe Sidharth can tell me if I have remembered right. They swept it. But the interesting point was, why were they able to win all those seats? Because India is structured on a first past the post system. So if it's the BJP versus 3 different opposition parties, the BJP is going to win because the opposition vote is splintered. And what made this election very significant is that the opposition realized that, the crisis of democracy in India had hit really existential levels, and they set aside their differences and somehow managed to campaign together. They agreed seat sharing arrangements. So the opposition vote wasn't splintered. And in that case, the many opposition candidates were able to defeat BJP candidates in specific constituencies. There was one other party that wasn't with the opposition alliance and was not with the BJP, but a lot of people feel that she actually is kind of terrorized by the BJP because she has the possibility of a lot of criminal cases against her. And so she stays apart and she draws off some of the opposition support. But basically, kind of like in Italy, I mean, the right here has had an easy time in recent elections because the opposition is splintered. And in Uttar Pradesh, in the Hindi belt, and in UP particularly, the fact that the opposition unified seriously enabled them to make gains against the BJP compared with the past, where they were essentially splintered. I do think that the kind of model of development that's been followed has tended to favor large business interests, well-connected business interests, and that others, I put myself on a timer so I wouldn't go over. But I do think that, within kind of other members of the business community, maybe the kind of smaller business people, there is a feeling that, it's hard to succeed. So, and that the system isn't necessarily so favorable to them. I'd like to just make one last point, which kind of relates to the element of what a surprise it was. The results were so shocking. I think you just cannot overstate the degree to which the BJP has totally controlled the informational landscape, both on social media, mainstream media. So I think it's actually very hard for people to get a true sense of what's going on and the mood of the country, because it's moved so far from years ago when I was there the first time. I think that it's harder for people to really know the pulse of the nation. I think people keep their thoughts to themselves. I'm very curious about those exit polls. Either people lied to the pollsters or the pollsters were bullied into changing their results, which has also been speculated. So I think, people know what the situation is, and I think they're very cagey about what they really think about things. And I think the media doesn't like to downplay, doesn't like to give any spotlight to discontent or troublesome issues or people's unhappiness, because media owners face a lot of pressure. So I think it's hard to know what's really going on, but it's obvious that there were a number of voters who did use this ballot to express their disappointment with what has been going on in recent years. Plus, the unification or the alliance of the opposition was quite, it did have an impact.
Thank you very much. You made a number of interesting points. One of them, which struck me particularly, is what you said, that there is not just one Indian election. In fact, there are many Indians who go to the polls under the same electoral process, but with different priorities in mind. There's the Hindu belt, there's the South. The South, where language is different, alphabet is different, traditions, everything is completely different. And this is something which we tend to overlook from time to time. If you look at the way in which the political situation develops in the country, one should take into account this factor as well as that of the regional parties. The regional parties in India are important. They were meant to become less important this election time, and in fact it didn't work. It worked the other way around, and the regional parties maintained fully their influence and power. And also, what you said about the inequality in the farmers. I mean, India still has 200 million poor living under $1.50 a day, and 500 million strong farmer community, which has had development, infrastructure, latrines, banking reform, but still struggle to survive, and that is a point which I think has had its obviously its impact. But on this, let me turn now to Sidharth Bhatia. Sidharth, well, the BJP has remained, nevertheless, as Alessandra Muglia said, the strongest party, but it relies on two unwieldy and not easily controllable allies for the two parties, Chandrababu Naidu and Nashid Kumar, who are old hands of Indian politics, who have a tradition of sticking to allies and alliances and moving around. Now, how much is this going to impact on the way in which the next Modi government, because there will be another Modi government, of course, the Modi government has won the election, has been reappointed Prime Minister, and there will be a Modi government. To what extent is this going to condition the way in which the next government will be able to function? Because the power base and inclinations of both these two regional parties tend to be different in many ways, sort of free marketeer, sort of ultra-liberal approach, which the Modi of the Make in India style based his policy on. So how much will this impact on Modi's ability to pursue a line in continuation to what he's done so far, that is to say, opening up India to further liberalization, foreign intervention, foreign investment, the attempt to turn the country into a advanced manufacturing world power, which is not what it is now, and so on. And how much, on the other hand, will the coalition government have to force or induce or convince Modi to take a closer look at social policies, issues of inequality, and the general promotion of a more balanced democratic environment. In this also, what was important, at least to me, is I think the point was made earlier by all previous interventions, the survival, or rather healthy survival, of the regional parties. The regional parties were meant not to become major factors of the political scene. In fact, the contrary has happened, and they're very much there, and their conditioning of power has increased. Is this good? Is this bad? I'm not sure how this looks out, but I wonder what your points would be. And finally, the point is, the India coalition fared well, and the points were made for this in many cases. What is interesting also is the return of Rahul Gandhi. Now, Rahul Gandhi had more or less been written off as also run for many years, and the idea was, many people felt that the Congress party under the fifth generation Gandhi family leadership had now become weakened beyond possibility of resuscitation. Well, it looks like resuscitation is in fact possible. What are your ideas on all this?
Thank you, Ambassador. Quite a few questions, quite a few points you made. I'll try to cover as many as possible. Firstly, the question of a Modi government which is supported by two very strong, I would even say erratic partners, because Mr. Nitish Kumar, one of the supporters from Bihar, from the northern state of Bihar, is known to keep changing parties. So at any time he could be, he could be tempted to move over to the India coalition, or even go his own way. So as far as economic policy is concerned, for the time being, I don't think these two parties will interfere in any way. One of them, Mr. Naidu, himself is a major reformer, so I don't think he's going to interfere. Mr. Nitish Kumar has to protect his turf in his own state, and there are elections going to come up, so I don't think he will want to get involved in the economic policy part of it. I don't think Mr. Modi's policies have been investment friendly, maybe up to a point, but he's not necessarily. The government of India is quite protectionist in its own way. And there is a tendency to think that most of these major economic policies have favored only a few chosen few businessmen. So I think if these two realize that that's going to hurt them in some way, maybe in their next state elections, they will probably interfere. Where it comes to social policies, that's going to be a major issue. I specifically want to touch upon two or three things. One is that the Mr. Nitish Kumar has been pushing for a caste census. He was the first to hold a caste census in his state, and he may. The BJP is totally against it. He is totally for it. How that plays out is to be seen. The census has not been held for about 12 years, so he is going to push for that. The second social policy is welfare for the poor. This government has done quite a bit, but not enough. And I think he will push for welfare of the poor, more policies for the welfare of the poor. That is economic policies as well as other social policies, reservation, etc. The third question is the impression that when the BJP is in power, there's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment and anti-Muslim violence. I think both these states have Muslim populations, and I think they will probably lean upon Mr. Modi to curb that kind of thing. And so those are the things that will bear watching. Otherwise, these two are going to ask for special favors for their states. And if they get them, they are pretty much going to stay away from day-to-day policy running. Both have got only one minister each. So Mr. Modi has set up a team, which is a cabinet, which is more or less exactly in the key areas the same as last time. So clearly he wants continuity rather than change in that sector. The other questions, I think you had a question on Rahul Gandhi, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So Rahul Gandhi was written off because he was seen as a dilettante, as a man who was not particularly interested in the political grind, who kept on taking vacations, and there was a big social media campaign against him. But in the last 4 or 5 years, he has emerged as a mature politician, and these two yatras, that is the long walks he took through the length and breadth of the country, have brought him in touch with the public, which is more than can be said about Mr. Modi, because Mr. Modi does not connect with the ordinary person. And he has taken them, he has carried civil society with him, and he ensured that the Congress did not prove to be in any way, stopping, that it would stop or object to other parties coming together, because there's normally what they say is that the Congress is very arrogant. I think he has compromised quite a bit. The Congress has compromised, and that has really helped the opposition come together. And had it not come together, we wouldn't have seen this result. So I think he has matured, and I think he has proved that he can be a solid politician. Many of his remarks in and outside Parliament have really carried weight with the Modi government. They have reacted. In fact, I would say, Ambassador, and for the people who are assembled here, this is the first time there was an election in which the BJP was reacting to the Congress rather than the other way around. The Congress was always known to be a party that used to react to what the BJP, provocative remarks by the BJP. This is the other way around this time. So clearly the agenda was being set by the Congress and the other opposition parties. And the opposition parties agreed to come together. Whether is a $64 million question, whether they will stick together, we cannot say. I think for the most part they will. And when it comes to fighting in Parliament, we shall see soon enough when there's the next Parliament session. But if they band together in Parliament, they can really make things difficult for this government, because this government has been known to pass executive orders rather than discuss laws in Parliament. Let's not also forget that whatever the BJP is bound to get more outside support sooner or later. It will manage that. But let's not support that 240 figure that the BJP seats are. That figure will never change. And therefore, it will always have to rely on outside support for a coalition, and that outside support can be removed at any time. It can walk away at any time. So it will always have to be watching carefully to see who's on its side and who's not. If there is a situation in Parliament that the opposition parties attack it and the BJP does not get the support of its allies for some reason or the other, it happens. It happened to Mr. Vajpayee. Then I think it will be a very difficult situation for this government. So I think what you have to see is whether the BJP itself has the spirit to carry out reforms, because now it will have to keep on watching keep on thinking, second guessing how the others are going to help it or hinder its plans. The two coalition partners, of course, but things could change with the other opposition parties. Somebody may move and promise but not come through. It's going to be a very touch and go situation for the next couple of years.
Thank you very much, Sidharth. Well, yes. I would put you that if the coalition around Congress Party under the name of India sticks together in the coming 2 years, this will be a major development on the Indian political scene, because this is not the tradition of these coalitions. They generally get unstuck fairly soon for a number of reasons, which are some of which are noble and some are less noble. But we'll see what that happens. The other point, according to Rahul Gandhi, which has always fascinated me, is on the one hand, someone like Mr. Modi got hold of the BJP party, turned it completely upside down, got rid of all the old leadership and put in his own people through it. Whilst the Congress party has done the opposite. In fact, the old leadership has remained in power and all the young aspiring fellows have moved away. So that may have been a cause for weakening the party or not. But again, that is a point, and I take very much your point on the fact of the Congress having become a stronger partner. Well, the election result shows that anyway. If I may now turn to Malcolm Masciaga, let us talk a little bit more about what has happened on the economic front in general, what the expectations are for the next years in India and India's role in the economic, commercial, and financial world. I mean, everyone knows that in the international public opinion, especially the opinion of financial centers and business in general, India was the new aspiring El Dorado for international economic cooperation, the new China, the new manufacturing giant, and all that. Now, this election has shown that despite the considerable strength of the Indian economy is still 1/5 of the Chinese economy, and its manufacturing capabilities tend to be quite limited. Interestingly enough, the former governor of the Indian Central Bank, Mr. Rajan, argued in the Financial Times a couple of days ago that the future of India lies not in manufacturing, but lies much more in the developing of its abilities on AI and services, for which it does have highly qualified workforce, whilst there is not a highly qualified workforce in manufacturing, despite Mr. Gandhi's ambition to become an advanced industrial country by 2047. But if you do that, if you concentrate on services, your GDP increases certainly, but the workforce increase is certainly way below what the needs of the country are. I mean, you have a young country with tens of millions of workers coming into the market every month, and it's certainly not services which will be able to do this. All this to say, how do you think the economic dimension of India will turn in the coming years, and what will be the expectations of foreign investors into the country? Is India, in your mind, is India going to remain a priority destination for international investment? Will the Modi government gyrations have a negative impact on the valuation, on the overall stability of the country, or is this not the case at all? Will, in fact, despite what we all said, India remain a viable international partner, and its proposition sufficient enough to encourage investment, perhaps not with the as high a degree enthusiasm as in the past, but enthusiasm nevertheless?
Well, I think it's difficult to think about foreign investors not taking into consideration the sheer size of the country, almost 1.5 billion people. At the same time, we have to consider the shape of the Indian recovery after the pandemic. There has been a lot of debate in India about the shape of the recovery, and some people were talking about a K-shaped recovery, stressing the fact that some of the sections of society, the upper classes, have benefited from the recovery much more than the lower classes have done. And this has definitely had an impact on the attractiveness of the country, because if you come here to sell BMWs, it is an excellent market with huge margins of growth. But if you come to sell different kinds of products, you definitely have to work on the ground in India and found a way to make them marketable to an audience which has a different spending power compared with a lot of other Asian countries which have gone through the development phase before India. And they've also have been through a development phase that went through manufacturing. As you stressed, India has always found its strength in the service sector, and as Raghuram Rajan says, you should go ahead in this direction. It's difficult to predict about the manufacturing part because, on the one hand, the past two governments invested heavily in infrastructure, which is an essential part of any manufacturing country with any ambition, which means ports, which means roadways to transport goods from one place to the other. At the same time, we must consider that the policy that have been taken by the government in this regard have stressed, for instance, make the country attractive to, let's call them very sexy investors like Apple, for instance, or companies producing microprocessors and semiconductors. Huge incentives have been given to these companies to set up shops in India. Some of them are in the southern state of Tamil Nadu. Some others are going to set up their plants in Gujarat, which is always a favorite when it comes to large projects. But huge amounts of money have been spent to attract these companies to India, whereas what is being spent for schools, for instance, and to improve and to create human capital in a country which is definitely weak in this regard, has not been as big. And so this is probably a sticking point when it comes to create the conditions to attract investors, because it's true that you can have ports from which you can ship your goods. It's also true the wages are consistently lower than in the West. But at the same time, if you have to retrain people And if you can't find the right people to run your business, it can be a very difficult proposition to set up a manufacturing plant, and also to a certain extent also a service sector companies. So for what regards not manufacturing, not services, but the stock exchange, what we have seen in the last few days were wild swings. There was a collapse on Monday after the exit polls, which were completely wrong. And some people believed in the exit polls, and some others wanted to believe in the exit polls. The following day, there was an immediate recovery. Now we are back to where we were before the election results. But at the same time, we must stress that most of the recovery has come from local investors and not as much from foreign institutional investors, which at this stage look a bit more cautious.
Thank you very much. Yes, well, I mean, the swings in the stock exchange were actually quite extraordinary, and they led someone to believe wrongly, probably, there might have been a risk of some insider trading, so not training but trading. Sorry, the wrong word. Tied to the unexpected electoral results and so on. And also, it's true, Apple is invested by Apple in India, but if I remember right, Mercedes closed shop, and that is physical manufacturing, in fact. And there is a highly competent, technically skilled, smallish workforce in India, whilst the larger manufacturing workforce is largely unskilled, certainly far more unskilled than the one in China. And that is an element which has to, I think, be borne in mind. If I may now turn to Nicola Missaglia, one point which we have not touched upon, which I think is interesting, is the Muslim dimension. The BJP campaign was very strong on anti-Muslim sentiment, and anti-Muslim and anti-minority sentiment. And again, I think, once again, the whole Hindutva thing, the idea of a nativist policy which excludes anyone who does not belong to a Hindu dimension, 100% Hindu dimension, applied to Muslims in ways which were clear, they're also very spectacular in many ways, but it applies to all the minorities. It applies to Christians, it applies to Buddhists, it applies to Jains, it applies to all minorities, to which that electoral platform provided a fairly negative perspective for the future. Now, the result, as has been mentioned before by most of you, belied this point, in the sense that the Hindutva element was meant to be one of the strong points of a runaway success, and it turned out to be one of the weaker points. Does this, in your mind, bring the possibility of a moderation by the part of Modi and his government of the anti-Muslim or exclusivist dimension of the policies which were carried out in the last 5 years, and which raised concerns in India, and which I think should raise concerns internationally as well? But then again, I understand this is an open question, but I wonder if you might wish to speculate on this particular point. And finally, Mr. Modi will be traveling to Italy tomorrow, actually, I believe, because the G7 in Ignazio is in a couple of days' time. He will be again greeted as a major player, but perhaps not as the star player which he would expect to have been had the elections gone the other way around. We already talked about the perspective for foreign investment, the way in which international business looks at India. Will also be interesting to see how the international dimension looks at the political situation and the ability of India to become a cooperative member of the international community. I mean, India has changed many of its policies and now has a much more open regional policy than it used to have, but it is still a country which tends to deal in terms of power rather than in terms of coalition, and the way in which it presents itself is a way which does not necessarily entail the possibility of strongly based cooperation. The long history of the EU-India trade agreement, I think, is a very good illustration and point. It's been going on for the last 17, 19 years, if I'm not wrong, but perhaps a bit more. Finally, I wonder if you'd like to comment. India is a destination of growing importance for Italy in politically, social, culture, but also for foreign Italian investors in the country. It's been the relationship has been on a sinusoid throughout its history. I mean, ups and downs. We are now in a period of particularly sustained relationship based also on a strong personal understanding between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Meloni. Interestingly enough, they have a very similar personal political history. They both come from the extremes within their own country. They've both tried to move towards the center. Mrs. Meloni has had a big success. Mr. Modi has not had a big success, but the relationship still remains quite close. The question is should India remain a primary destination for our investors? Should we encourage them to continue to look at this as a priority destination with more caution, maybe, or with a long, essentially with a long view, which is, I think, perhaps the way in which India should be looked at altogether. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Can you hear me? Okay. So I will try to be brief, although the questions are many. Maybe I'll try to answer in a reverse order, starting from Italy. Yes, indeed, Modi and Prime Minister Meloni, they have created a fairly positive relationship over the last year, mainly the last year. Meloni was in India for the G20 meetings. Mr. Modi will come to Italy. They do share, let's say, a personal political history that might help this kind of relationship. But beyond that, I would say we know Italy and India have had difficult years 10 years back, for a decade or so. Relations between Italy and India have been improving since the Gentiloni government 5 or 6 years ago, when Gentiloni traveled. After him, Mr. Conte also hosted Modi and for the G20 meeting in Italy, and Meloni has consolidated this kind of positive trend in Italy-India relations. Italy and India have now, beyond personal relations, they have signed a strategic partnership, which means a formal partnership encompassing many fields, including infrastructure investment, including digitalization, including connectivity. Both India and Italy are part of this new trade corridor called IMEC, trying to, let's say, counterbalance the Chinese BRI through the Middle East and to Europe. Now, a second premise, yes, Modi will come to Italy. He's maybe weaker than before, but let's not forget that he has won the election, so he's still in charge in India. And although he has not got the majority he hoped for, I actually think this might be good news for India's partners as well, including Italy, because this election was a signal to Modi that maybe his next government should focus more on what India needs right now, meaning reforms, mainly reforms. It is high time that the Indian government, as our distinguished speakers told us before, focus on job-intensive growth, which has not been the case until now, at least not in the last mandate of Modi. Modi's government, first government, 2014-2019, has been a more balanced government in terms of cultural agenda and economic reforms. There have been several interesting reforms for investors, mainly like the GST, inflation targeting, the bankruptcy code. While in the second term, Modi has rather concentrated and resorted to his cultural agenda. Now, with these election results now and the fact that Modi will only manage to govern India through compromises and relationships with his alliance partners, I think this could, bring the Hindutva agenda more down to earth, and because the electoral campaign by the BJP was very, very much concentrated on Hindutva rhetoric, on minority discrimination. Somehow we all remember the Muslim intruders discourse by Modi. But the ballots told us that the strategy did not really work out, that for ordinary Indians and even for businesses, the economic agenda, the job creation, the manufacturing development, the reduction of inequalities, the inclusiveness of labor are actual the priorities for Indians, and I think this is definitely good news. This can definitely be good news for the economy, for democracy, and for sure for minorities, because I mean, if Modi is a visionary and intelligent leader, as I think he is, I think he will try to understand what the ballots are telling him, and the ballots say that India needs reforms and needs them now. Of course, there is a possibility that the new government will try to push through Hindutva rhetoric, or to more pressure on civil liberties. But I don't think this will be the case. If Modi will focus more on reforms, this will be a good news for partners around the world as well. Definitely for Western partners. I think for Italy too, because Italy and India, they do have a good relationship now, but this relationship is definitely very much below potential. I mean, the bilateral trade between India and Italy is much less than the trade between Italy and China, for example. But Italy, like many Western countries, is looking at China, is looking at India because of its size, because of its growth potential, because of its growing middle class, but also because of structural changes that have happened in the world's geopolitics, meaning the West is increasingly having a tense relation with China, although China remains an important partner. We are looking for de-risking, we are looking for reshoring our investments, and India is the only country with a comparable size and potential as China. So I think, this could be an opportunity, these elections, even for Italy and India relations, and definitely for India's economy. Lastly, if we look at India's history, India's republican history after colonialism, we know that India's democracy, India's pluralist ethos, inclusive institutions, they have actually been the factor that has guaranteed the stability in India. India is a country where there are many, cultural tensions, a lot of diversity. There are centrifugal trends, separatism, and all of that. India's democratic and pluralist and inclusive institutions, until now, they have managed to diffuse this kind of tensions, and this means political stability, and this means economic stability in the end. And India's democracy has shown that it is stronger than we had believed, actually, over the last years. So I think this could be a good moment.
Thank you very much. Well, just briefly, if one looks the way sort of Indo-Italian relations have developed over the years, Italy has a strong tradition of presence in India. I mean, if you're looking at Republican India, Italy was an important element of the first agricultural reform in India in the late 40s and 50s. Private motorization was Italian: Fiat, Lambretta, Piaggio. The slang name for an electric fan in India is Marelli, and so on and so on. The presence was very strong when India was not an industrial power and it was a small, in terms of economy, much smaller country. The sinusoid has been there all the time. There's been a lot of attention paid in Italy at what happened the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. I mean, the Marines thing and all that. But in fact, we had been below our potential before that and remained below our potential after that. There's a matter, I think, of attention, there's a matter of scale, there's a number of points which are... But if we take into mind the fact that this is a interesting market for us in strategic terms, even though, as you were saying, it's not, I mean, it's 1/5 of China, let us not forget that, but being 1/5 of China, I mean, there's a lot of room for growth, and those who position themselves rightly can do that. So I think the possibilities are definitely there. We have a strong tradition. We need to look at our past, and we have to sort of be careful at not looking at sort of rhetorical elements which are less important. We did sign a strategic partnership a couple of years ago. We did sign a strategic partnership with Mr. Prodi in 2006, and by 2012 that strategic partnership had been forgotten. So I think we need to be careful in looking at the way we develop the relation with this country at the substantive matters underway. Indian democracy, to my mind, is solid. The question is Hindutva going to be a tactical component of the present government in order to maintain some kind of consensus based on this? Or does it go deep to the heart of Mr. Modi and his concern? But this is something which we do not know. My own personal inkling, I'll be entirely wrong, is that Modi is a Hindu fundamentalist, but he is also an able politician and he understands tactics and strategy very well. And so very much the way this has happened in other countries that happen much closer to us, you can move from extreme to the center to the advantage of everybody. I mean, one at least hopes this is what might happen. I think we more or less gone a bit. Do we have a few minutes from questions from the audience? I think we may have a few minutes, if you allow. If there are any questions, I can't see anybody. We don't have a light on, but do you think we can have a light on? Thank you. Any questions? I think you need a mic.
I apologize for my poor English, but anyway, I would like to ask you if you think that after this election, India will take a more, I would say, a more strong attitude towards what's happening in the world right now. I mean, China and India relationship with the Western countries, the attitude towards the worst that we are experiencing now, and or will India continue in this tactical, what I perceive as a tactical positioning, basically doing his own business and leaving us in a sort of waiting for a decision on this item. This is the first question. The second question is, I feel that you mentioned the Hindu, the nationalist Hindu attitude of Mr. Modi as rooted in his beliefs, and what will. And I feel that there is something as very similarly in our countries right now. But you mentioned also that the tactics of an intelligent politician can drive him in more, let's say, more conciliant or more collaborative attitudes towards allies, or even to reach his objectives. If you transfer this attitude to the European Union and the role that for example, our governments can play in the next European Union, do you think similarities with India in this specific historical times? I hope I made my questions clear, but I'm not sure. Thanks a lot.
Who would like to? I will just start off saying that, I mean, Mr. Modi has a history of Hindu fundamentalism. He's a paid member of the Hindu fundamentalist RSS. So this is where he comes from, and this is what he probably believes. At the same time, in order to be a successful, not only politician, but statesman, you need to govern and not only follow ideology. And the question is, it's an open question. I mean, to what extent will pragmatism and political ability turn Modi from a far-right extremist into an effective statesman? He's probably halfway down. He was, the first two elections strengthened his position and allowed him actually to play both hands at the same time. Now he's been slightly weakened, so he has the choice of going two ways. One is the path of going back to exclusivism, nativism, and intolerance, which I think is not what he will do, but it's a possibility. The other is that of accepting a situation in which he will have to govern, bearing in mind the complex nature of his country, and moderate his tones and take a more centrist approach. That there are similarities to what is happening in other parts of the world as well. But I mean, I'll leave the floor to you.
Maybe for the foreign policy question, will it change, will it not? I don't think there will be major changes in India's attitude in international affairs. Modi's foreign policy has not deviated from the fundamentals of India's foreign policy after independence. So substantially, India's foreign policy has remained a sort of non-aligned foreign policy towards, they have many friends but no allies. They refuse to enter alliances that can be too tight for India. Now, non-alignment has become multi-alignment in Modi's actual foreign policy. I don't see this this changing for two reasons. The first reason is this multi-alignment attitude, which Modi and his Minister of Foreign Affairs and his government have managed fairly well and pragmatically, seems to have strengthened India's position globally, actually, over the last 2 years. I mean, today we're speaking about India. 3 or 4 years ago, probably we wouldn't have. So India has not taken it has taken multi-aligned positions. You know, India buys energy from Russia, but buys airplanes from the US and France. They have India is part of the BRICS, but it is also part of the Quad. European leaders visit India because we look at India as the world's largest democracy and potentially one of the world's largest markets. But Putin goes to India as well. So this, I don't see this really changing. Maybe in a couple of decades, if India really becomes, the world's third economy, a leading superpower, India will have to choose sides, will be forced to choose sides. But in this context right now, India has more to gain than to lose in remaining multi-aligned and very. We may call that ambiguous, but it's a very pragmatic attitude that works in an increasingly multipolar world.
Dobbiamo chiudere.
Still this stigma of big pharma that is impossible to buy direct from the Italian state Indian production, because now there is mostly on e-commerce. That is nonsense. So Indian products, they arrive especially from e-commerce that is privately small, very small companies and so on. But I think if the future will be sector is improved because in India have a lot of resource and an economy interested in this specific pharmacology products. Thank you.
Sorry, before just 1 minute to say thank you very much, Amy Kazmin. It will have to leave us now. It's very nice to have you with us, and look forward to having you again soon in our discussion. We'll have to continue these talks, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you so much. It was my great pleasure. I'm actually rushing off to the G7,
Okay.
so sorry about that. But it's been a fascinating conversation, and I'll definitely look forward to continuing to talk about India and Italy together.
Any point on the point made? I'm afraid.
Pharmacology. I don't know. Maybe our guests, but.
Any one of our guests wish to comment on this, on pharmaceuticals and the way in which we can develop our cooperation? I'm afraid. Sorry.
Are they improving or working, or it's difficult for them to become more independent? Very different they are in comparison with Milan, for instance, Delhi in Milan. And what is happening for female conditions in the companies? I mean, in the lands. I mean,
I think this would require.
There will be a great difference in between Delhi and other parts of.
I'll give just a very short answer because the time is running out, but just one suggestion. In the last elections, we have an indication of the women that are more empowered in India because they are voting on their own and not following the family orientation. That's why both Modi and both India have been targeting women specifically, because now they've become like a bank vote. It was not like that in the past. So just that, one thing.
Maybe just in addition, from a labor market point of view, the situation is different. So politically, I mean, Indian women are increasingly empowered, but India, like many other countries as well, but India suffers a very, very deep gender gap in labor inclusion, meaning only 1 woman on 3, more or less, so 30% of women who could work works. So, and this is, of course, a big problem for the future of India's labor market. I mean, India has a growing labor force, young labor force, but only 1 woman on 3 is included in this labor force. And this is one of the problems that the coming governments will have to address, definitely.
In societal terms, I mean, there's a long way to go still, of course. I mean, if you look at urban Bombay, not so much urban Delhi, you will find a situation perhaps not terribly dissimilar to that of Milan, urban Bombay. In other parts of India, and certainly in Delhi, you would find a very different situation. The condition of women in India has been improving, politically has improving very much. In terms of real equality, in terms of access to society in general, there's a long way to go still. This the last question, I think.
You hear me? Okay. A quick question on manufacturing. So you said something before, but I wanted to specifically ask your view on the future of manufacturing and the Make in India policy, which was a pillar of the first term of Mr. Modi. So what is the view on the future, considering what I think you correctly said about the dimension of the economy, which is still slim in terms of comparison with China, and manufacturing-wise the same, and seen from the outside, you see somehow big changes in manufacturing shifts, like Apple producing iPhones in India, which is an important move, and on the other side you still see a very fragmented supply side with limited activities really scaling up. So the question is, what's going to be the future?
Difficult to say. The Make in India, and others will have different views, the Make in India policy was an aspirational policy, to my mind, let's put it this way, to a large extent. It's certainly very much at the core of what Modi had in mind, also in terms of power. I mean, India as the world power, India as the reference power of the global south and all that, has to, in Modi's mind, also become a global manufacturing giant. There's bureaucracy, there's training, there's a number of elements that still go against this. And when Raghuram Rajan says we have to we have to point at services and AI, that's the way India will grow, he's saying something which is correct in economic terms, but not in terms of the workforce, which is untrained anyway, insufficiently trained, and grows constantly. Is India... someone mentioned physical infrastructure, roads, all that. There's a lot of that going on. But the high-level manufacturing, I think, is still, to my mind, an aspiration rather than a reality. And I wonder whether the next government of Modi will give the same priorities as the previous one did, for the reasons we mentioned. I'm sorry that I took your place. What if you?
No, it's, I perfectly agree with that. So, maybe I don't know, Marco Masciaga has something.
Marco Masciaga, do you have a comment?
No, I agree with what you just said. That's absolutely true. There's an issue with human capital, and there's an issue with convincing companies to set up shops in several parts of the country. The country is huge. Even if you are successful with the manufacturing policies, which can be said so far, you will find yourself with huge sections of the society, huge parts of the country which are completely cut off. I mean, this is a very huge country, and China has achieved what has achieved starting well before India. So it's true that India can become the third largest economy in a few years' time. This is a major point for this government. But at the same time, we must consider that becoming the third largest economy is relatively simple. Then, because the fourth largest and the third largest have similar size to India, not that big. But on the other hand, the US and China, they are on a completely different game, on a completely different league. So it will take quite some time, I think.
On this, I think we will have to bring this to an end. Thank you very much for attending this conference. I think that we broached a number of subjects. There's many more we can have discussions on next time, but thank you very much to Marco Masciaga, Sidharth, Bhatia, Amy Kazmin, and Muglia and Missaglia, who were with us tonight. And thanks to Fondazione Corriere della Sera, of course, for hosting us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon to talk about India. It's a never-ending subject. Thank you again.